Yeah, hello and welcome to another workshop live from the HOFA studios. My name is Steffen and I'm here to talk about amp simulations for the next 45 minutes. Yes, where do we want to start? Yeah, amp simulations. The name basically says what it is. It's the simulation or VST version of an actual guitar or bass amp. And yeah, I'm here to show you what you can do with it. And I brought some examples and I'm gonna show you how we turn this into this. Yeah, I'm gonna show you how I dialed in the tones for these tracks, and also explain some things about what you want to do if you want to dial in a tone like this, and even though if you want to do it with a actual amp or if you want to do it in the amp sim. And if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. And I'd say we're just gonna delete all the amp sims I used here, and then I'm gonna go over the process of what I used. As you can see, I have a couple of tracks here, mainly guitars, a bass track, and also a little keyboard track. And I'm also going to show you what you can do with amp synths to get a more exciting key tone. But I want to start with the crunch guitars, because this is something many people say. I'm sorry. If you want to dial in a good crunchy tone, many people say you gotta go with an analog or an actual amp. And I'm gonna challenge myself now and try to dial in a warm and crunchy tone. And yeah, let's see what we're gonna do. If you could get the multi-tracks. I don't know. I just played this a couple hours before the workshop. This is not a finished production in any way. This is basically just an example. But if you're interested, feel free to mail me. I'm gonna tell you at the end of the workshop again. But hey, let's start with the crunchy guitars. These are here in the intro. No, I don't want to add another track. I want to show you the crunchy guitars. Come on. Let's solo. I already grouped and panned them. Already, just two DI tracks I played with this guitar. This is a Solar A2.6 with two humbucker pickups, but a 5-way switch. By using that, you can switch from the humbucker to the single coil up here, and thus getting a more spanky and let's say more fitting tone for a clean or crunchy track, because this guitar is obviously made for metal. But hey, let's show you the crunchy guitars. Two tracks, slightly panned. It sounds like this. Yeah, nothing special, just a basic DI track. And I want to start with a plugin I've just recently tried to test, because I thought it would be quite fitting for this. And that's the Neural DSP Tone King emulation. Basically, Neural DSP is one of the standard or setting the standard for amp synths, because they just sound good no matter what they do. Most models of their simulations are aimed for the metal community, but this obviously is an amp made for clean and crunchy tones. If you look closely, I didn't put it on the single tracks here. I used it on the group, And that's because I want to also use the internal effects like reverb and delay in this plugin. And as we know, these should often sound a bit thin and not as roomy as we want them if we use them in mono. Also, I can send both of the tracks in this amp. I just have to switch the input mode to to stereo, I'm sorry. And let's hear what it sounds like right out the box. It already sounds pretty good, but let's see if we can do a bit more to it. I think it could be a bit brighter, so let's just push the treble a bit. Let's see what we got on the back. A high frequency comp, let's see what that does. I actually like what it does. Yeah, pretty standard to most amp simulations. Complete amp simulations is a cabinet section. We can choose between different mics and different speakers. Here we have the pretty common SM57 and the Roya R121. I actually like this combination for this type of sound. So what I don't like is it still sounds a bit spanky and a bit too clean for my taste. So what we could do is increase the volume. Here, if it actually works as a sometimes you have sometimes where the volume works as an input volume, but we have this up here, and let's just increase that a bit to drive the input a bit more. That's more what I'm going for. Just a slight crunchy and warm tone, as you would expect it. Just what we want. We have another. What we also could do is we could fiddle with the EQ here. Just to get rid a bit of the muddiness in the mids here, just turn down the 500 hertz, just slightly, not much, and we could. I think we also could boost the presence a bit. Let's see. Yeah, I like that. And yeah, now we have the effects after. We also have an effects section before, in front of the VM. We have a compressor, overdrive, but I don't think we're gonna need them for the tone I'm going for right here. So let's take a look at the reverb. You can, which is pretty common, you can sync it. Let's do that, and we have a quarter note. That's okay for me, but I would turn the mix down a little bit and also just add a little pre-delay to the reverb and also turn down the dry-wet knob a bit. Yeah, as I said, now you hear the delay is actually in stereo. Let's just see what happens if we turn it in mono. This is how you would use it on an individual DI track, but as I already said, we're using this on the group here because yeah, it felt just a little bit more fitting for this, just to keep it simple here. But I also going to show you how to use them on individual tracks. If you have any suggestions on how I could fiddle with these sounds, as I said, you can put it in the chat, and we, yeah, gonna try to find another sound. But I actually like that as we have it here. Just a quick pointer, as I said, you fiddle with the input knob of your amp simulations, especially if you want to just go for a crunchy tone. It actually makes a huge difference. Just gonna set it back for a moment. As you see, I already have a bit of clipping here in the input, but as long as it sounds good, I'm not caring about this that much at the moment. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't care about clipping, but in this case, as we take a look at our output, we're safe for the moment. So yeah, that's one possibility on how to dial in a crunchy tone. If you want to do that, of course, you have to consider that some amps are more fitting for that kind of tone than others. Therefore, if a simulation is out for that, you should go for that. Yeah, the Tone King from Neural DSP is one possibility. There are many other great options. Some chorus, yeah, why not? I actually prepared something. If you take a look here, I just hid them here. I have a chorus already prepared because I want to add it later. But since we already used the internal effects, let's add the chorus we have here. Yeah, just play around until you have something you like. Especially, gotta be a bit careful with modulation effects because they can sound a bit too dreamy or something. Just be a bit careful. Sometimes less is more, but I think it adds to the sound. So great suggestion there. Yeah. I also prepared a little lead guitar for the intro, which should also be a bit crunchy. I already have the sound effects engaged here. It sounds like this. Turn them off again, and I'm gonna show you another amp sim, and that's the Amp VX30 by ML Sound Lab. Clearly a version of the Vox AC30 classic amp for crunchy sound, played by players like Brian May. And yeah, let's try to dial in a slightly overdriven Vox type lead sound. Yeah, yet again, I'm fiddling with the input, and I'll compensate on the output later. And then I just try to dial in with the minor EQ settings I have here, with the frequency card, the treble, and the bass. Let's see where we end up. You have to also consider it has to work with the rhythm crunch guitars. So let's check for context. In this particular amp simulation, you have also different types. There you have a AC30 from the 90s. Let's check for the AC30 from the 60s, and also the the cabinet simulation that goes with it. Let's check in solo so we can hear the difference. Yeah, I think the 90s Vox sounds a bit brighter and a bit more in your face, and that's actually what I'm going for with this lead tone, so I'll choose the 90s Vox and go for the EQ section again. Could also fiddle with the cap here a bit. We have a SM57 and a Sennheiser MD421, and let's check the balance in the mix. I'm actually leaning for the 57 at that moment because it sounds a bit smoother than the MD421. But we can also angle it a bit. Let's check if what that does. It should get a bit smoother by now. Still leaning to the 57, so I like that. It cuts through without being too spitty, so let's engage the effects I prepared. Let's hear it in solo again on how much I added of the effects. I'm gonna show them actually. As a send, I used a stereo delay. This is actually a freeware version of that, with a synced delay time with a dotted eighth on one side and just quarter notes on the other. I filtered the low and the high end, and I also made it a bit wider, but not completely on the left and right, so it's don't sound too isolated and jumps around in the stereo field. Just added some reverb, just a vintage plate with 2-second decay time. Also filtered it a bit. Could even filter it a bit more. And yeah, the system chorus doing what it's supposed to. Yeah, and together it sounds like this. Let's add the rhythm. Yeah, this is something also if you're using amps or amp simulations, try to use different amps or impulse responses, different caps when dialing in a rhythm and a lead tone, because they have to separate in the frequencies a bit just to have their space in the mix, especially with the lead guitar. If they get just soaked up by the rhythm guitars, yeah, that's not what we want. Especially, so we want kind of different sounds, different tones for different purposes, because mostly we have due to the tonality of the lead tones, we were a bit more mid-focused. I'd often go for a more mid-focused tone with a lot of presence, while with a crunchy tone I lean to something that's slightly scooped, not that much scooped, but slightly, so we can fit the lead tone just somewhere in the mids. And that's also something I'm gonna show with the heavy rhythm guitars. Just gonna loop them again and show you what they sound like without any effects. And in that case, I'll actually use the amp simulations on the individual tracks, because I want to show you how you get a wide tone with using slightly different guitar sounds. And for that, I'll use STL Tones Amp Up. Sounds like this right off the bat. Not bad, but a bit mushy, a bit muddy and uncontrolled for my taste, especially if we're talking about low-tuned guitar sounds like this. This is actually in drop C sharp, and if you have palm mutes that low, they usually get a bit out of hand. Therefore, I'd suggest turning down the gain a bit, so you get a more attacky sound. And if you want to control the low end a bit, I'll suggest using an overdrive or a clean boost. In this case, we're gonna go with a classic Ibanez or a Maxon OD808. Settings for these, since we're only using it for the clean boost, are drive on 0. Balance at 12 o'clock, and tone dialed into taste. What this does is sending a slightly louder or slightly overdriven tone into the amp, thus tightening up the low end. But I could talk all day, but I'm either gonna show you what it sounds like. Listen closely to the palm use. This is where it actually happens. As you can see, I'm pretty low with the gain here. So yeah, if you want a modern metal tone, if you want it, I'd suggest going with a lower gain setting and a tube screamer in front of it, just to get that tight tone. Gonna show you something, a little preset I prepared. This is the software's version of a PVJSX, or later, as it was called later, the Triple X. Yeah. The gain already dialed back a bit, using an EQ, and this is also just an overdrive pedal with some extra bells and whistles, like a bright switch, which is on noon, and an attack switch, which is set to 1. And together it sounds like this. Could actually dial back the gain even further, because there needs to be more definition in the low end and in the palm mutes. Yeah, I also used the same cabinet section with some mics. I don't know what origin means in this case. Since they don't use the real names, I'm not quite sure what that is, but the eagle is actually an angle, using an MD 421 on this side, and I guess it's a Shure 441, that's an SM57 type of microphone, slightly leaning into the MD 421. And then just some EQs, parametric EQs, boosting the high frequencies here, and also cutting some nasty resonances in the presence. And yeah, this is usually between 2 and 4 kilohertz. This is usually a frequency range where heavily distorted guitars can sound quite nasty and spitty. So you might take a look at that. Yeah. So this, we have one side sounding like this. Let's center this for a moment. And let's go back and do the other side. And yet I prepared another preset. This time it's another classic amp. It's the PB5150 using some external impulse responses, which you can always load into these plugins. If you made some impulse responses from your particular cabinet, which is actually quite easy, you could also use them with the IR loader included in most of these plugins, or use an external IR loader. But I'm gonna use that for the moment. And now the right rhythm guitar sounds like this. Yet again, I'm gonna dial back the gain a bit. Again, just using an EQ and a tube screamer right in front of it as a clean boost, and doing some EQing in the back here. Now the tones of the two rhythm guitars are slightly different, and if I don't got anything wrong, we got a wide sounding rhythm guitar section, which is similar but just different enough to make it sound a bit wider. So let's have a listen. Yeah, the right mic is the right amp is sounding a bit darker, while the left one is definitely on the brighter side. Yeah, you could now go on and EQ them individually if you have some nasty resonances or frequencies in one particular track, and then just go and process them in the group here. Yeah, that's basically how to dial in a metal rhythm sound. So if you don't have any suggestions left, you could also quad track your tracks and go with even more amps. If you have, for example, one that's sounding more mid-focused, another which is quite scooped and present, and then you can mix them together. I personally like to keep it simple, go with 2 tracks, and that usually does the trick. Just for the sake of it, let's have a listen to where we at the moment with the crunchy rhythm tone, the crunchy lead, and the crunchy the heavily distorted rhythm sounds in context with unprocessed lead guitar, bass, and synth. Yeah, this is where I want to continue. We are going for the lead sound, and as I already said, I'm trying to find another sound which is quite different from the rhythm tone, therefore I'll also choose another amp simulation. And I actually like the 14 Nameless, which is a version of a custom amp made for the band Meshuggah, which was created by Mike Fortin. So it looks like a plexi, but this is a bit more like a plexi. Yeah. Yet again, we have a little effect section in front of the amp. This is a gate, a clean boost, and yet again an overdrive. Now you might think it doesn't matter what you're using there if you want to just use the clean boost, but I think that the clean boost only, here named the grind pedal, sounds a bit more spanky and attacky, and I want a more smoother tone for the lead parts, so I'm gonna turn that off and use the hex drive. I'm not even sure if we're gonna need it, so just turn it off. As I said, this is actually pretty special sounding. If you have to be really careful with the highs and mids on this plugin. No, actually, you can just dial in a lot of mids actually for in this plugin. Just be careful with other amp simulations and be careful with the treble because it's already pretty sharp sounding. Let's take a look at the cabinet section, find something that fits that tone. To smooth it out even more, I just go for the Royer 121, which usually sounds a bit muddy, but in combination with the 57 it usually works great. In this amp simulation we can also move the mic a bit further to the edge, away from the dust cap, and therefore it should sound even darker. Let's do the same for the 57. Let's have a listen in context. It actually cuts through the mix quite well, and this is one of the amp synths which doesn't have any additional effects, so yeah. Do I ever boost a little bit of drive on the OD pedal? Usually I don't. I just dial in more gain in the amp section because we want a longer sustain, and usually it's enough to do with it in the amp section. I also can show. Yeah, you can see here we have a high and a low input, and in the high input both of these gain knobs affect the sound, and this one is completely turned to 10. Gonna show you what it sounds if I just turn it back a bit. My favorite sounding cap for lead tone, that's a tough one. I actually can't tell you one. Usually I use what is in the amp sim and go for microphones or IRs that sound a bit more smoother and less spitty. Usually that's the ones where if you have a fixed IR, not like this one. So if you have something that looks like this, I usually go for those IRs that are a bit more on the cone, more on the edge of the caps, because they sound a bit smoother, a bit darker, and then just dial in, just mix them with a slightly sharper, but yeah, usually amps or cabinets like a Creamback or something that already sound pretty smooth also work pretty well with lead tones, but they also work pretty well with rhythm tones, because what we used here is actually an IR of a Creamback using an Audix i5 and slightly mixed in D2 on the same cabinet. So yeah, I'm not sure if I would go with something like a V Vintage 30, even though they are quite standard. But yeah, just try out with the IRs are out there. There are many great freeware options. Panda Sounds has some great IRs out there. ML Sound Lab, for example, they are the ones who did the VX30 I've shown. Yeah, many great options. Just have to do some research. Lancaster, if your audio has some great stuff. These we used here in the PV30 were actually made by, that's the wrong one. We used here were actually made by Dennis Ward, who's also a regular here on the workshops and a close friend to HOFA and long year employee and freelancer here. He did those with his Creamback isolation cap and his Audix mics, and they sound just great. If anyone has any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. You're helping out a fellow musician. Yeah, let's head back to our lead tone because we don't have much time left, and I still want to show you the bass and the lead and the keys. Yeah, we don't have any effects on at the moment, so let's just turn them on. Have a little bit of context here. Yeah, that's something. That's what I wanted here. A cutting but still smooth lead tone with a lot of sustain, and yeah, hope you can. You could work out something quite similar. Let's head over to bass. This is actually a virtual bass from Submission Audio. I bounced the track here. It sounds like this as a DI. And for a distorted bass sound or a bass sounds in general, you have to be a bit careful when you are saturating or distorting them, because if you're distorting the low end too much, your whole mix will sound mushy and undefined, and yeah, therefore multiband distortion is usually a good thing. In most cases, you just gonna copy the bass track and or the bass DI and use the amp sim on one, filter out the low end, and then have a clean DI track that is focused on the low end only. But I'm gonna show you a slightly different approach and something that is not often considered as a amp simulation, but it can be used as the one, and that's FabFilter Saturn. What I'm gonna do now, this is a multi-band saturation plugin which has some, let's say, amp simulations built in, or presets for that, and I'm gonna split the track into the frequencies in 3 sections. So we have our low end, let's say go for 200 Hertz. And then we have our mids, our low mids, and our high mids. And now we have to find a fitting distortion or saturation for all of these sections. I'm gonna say I'll leave this rather clean. Just go with a slight tape saturation just to stabilize it a little bit. Let's have a listen. It's not doing much, just a bit of stabilization here. But now let's go to the high frequencies and let's check. I'm gonna turn it off all the way so we hear what's going on. Yeah, this lead amp actually does what I want, but if you boost it all, you have this nasty frequency. But we can get rid of that later, I can show you. But let's have a little bit of distortion for the mids as well. This is also a frequency range where the bass can get pretty boxy, so I'll usually distort it just yeah, like 50% in this case, and then I'll also turn down the band a bit. So there we have a slightly more stable tone, and also have a little bit more grit that actually works as a counterpart to the slightly scooped guitar tone. Let's have a little bit of context here. Gonna turn it off. And now let's try to find the nasty frequency, which is, yeah, this is another great thing about amp simulations. You're pretty flexible on where you're gonna use your EQ, because in some cases it can be quite useful to use it in front of the simulation, so the nasty frequency doesn't even get sent into the simulation. I want to solo that for a moment. Yeah, there it is. So it sounds a lot more balanced, but I'm gonna show you now what it sounds like after or behind the Saturn. Yeah, I think it works a little bit better in front of the Saturn for this application, because the sound still contains its presence, and it loses that if we use it after the Saturn. So yeah, we're a bit short on time, so just head over to the keys really quick. This is just a basic lead sine tone, which is used as a harmony for the lead guitar. Sounds like this. Which is quite boring. So just use something like amp up, for example. Here you have to be a bit careful also. We have a stereo track. Let's go for a stereo routing there, because we also want to use the internal effects. Go for another preset, which I think could work pretty well. This is a Highward simulation. I have a flanger, delay, reverb, so yeah, pretty standard stuff. And let's have a listen what it sounds like with a bit of amp distortion and some effects. Yet again, could fiddle with the input bit. Yeah, that's where we're at now. So let's go back to our full clip and have a listen on where we are at the end of this. Yeah, at the end of this workshop. Yeah, that's just a short clip, and I hope that shows you what you can achieve with amp simulations if you're working with DI tracks only, or working in a home studio, or even in a commercial studio. You could reamp or add simulated sounds to your analog amp sounds if you feel they are somewhat kind, if there's something missing in your analog tone. And yeah, I think it's a great solution. It's very flexible, and I hope you learned something today. If you have any questions left, I'll be just around for a minute. If you have any questions, feel free to write in the chat. I guess someone wanted the multitracks. For that I could supply them. Please send a mail to college@hofa.de asking for the multitracks of this workshop, and I'll send them to you. So if there are no questions left, thank you for checking in. I hope you learned something, as I already said. And yeah, I hope to see you soon in the next workshop. Bye.